My name is Quinn Reynolds, 32, and I never thought my own flesh and blood could betray me so completely. Growing up wealthy in Massachusetts, I believed family meant something sacred. Then my grandfather died, leaving me a $10 million inheritance and our family business, or so I thought. The day my parents handed everything to my sister Samantha and dragged me out of our home by my hair changed everything. But they didn't know I'd been preparing for this moment all along. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories. I was always the responsible one in the Reynolds family. From childhood, my grandfather William, founder of Reynolds Technologies, took me under his wing. I remember sitting in his oak-paneled office at just 8 years old, legs swinging from a chair too tall for me, watching him review blueprints for new semiconductor designs. He'd point to different components and explain their functions, his eyes lighting up when I asked questions most kids wouldn't think of. "You've got the mind for this business, Quinn," he'd tell me, ruffling my hair. "You understand that innovation isn't just about the newest thing, but the right thing." My education was purposeful. Despite my family's wealth, I worked summer jobs throughout high school. Grandfather insisted I understand what it meant to earn $1 before I could responsibly manage millions of them. I graduated with honors from Wharton with an MBA, then started at entry level in Reynolds Technologies, refusing special treatment. "Make your own reputation," Grandfather advised. "Let them respect you for your work, not your name." Over 10 years, I climbed the corporate ladder on merit, eventually becoming Chief Operations Officer. Under my leadership, our medical technology division doubled its profits, and our renewable energy patents became industry standards. My sister Samantha couldn't have been more different. 3 years younger than me, she dropped out of Boston College after 2 semesters, claiming academia stifled her creativity. Her creativity primarily manifested in maxing out credit cards at luxury boutiques and planning extravagant parties at our family's Cape Cod summer house. Every few years, Samantha would announce a new passion project. There was the high-end bakery that closed after 6 months, the fashion blog that never got past 3 posts, and the interior design business that consisted mostly of redecorating our parents' home at their expense. Each venture received enthusiastic funding from our parents, Robert and Elaine Reynolds, with no expectation of return or accountability. "Samantha just needs to find her path," my mother would say, signing another check. "Not everyone is born knowing exactly what they want like you, Quinn." The favoritism was obvious but somehow unacknowledged within our family dynamic. When I secured a $20 million contract with a major hospital chain, my father responded with a dismissive nod. "The Reynolds name opened that door for you." But when Samantha managed to arrive on time to Sunday dinner, they celebrated like she'd cured cancer. Grandfather was different. In his late 70s, as his health began to decline, he became increasingly direct about his intentions for the company. "I've watched you build relationships with every department, understand the technology, and make decisions that balance profit with purpose," he told me during one of our weekly lunches. "When I'm gone, this company and the majority of my estate will be yours to steward. It's all written down, Quinn. You're ready for this responsibility." While I never wanted to think about losing him, I took comfort knowing his legacy would continue through my hands. He even showed me copies of his will and succession plans, all clearly indicating his intentions. I kept digital copies, not out of suspicion, but because I valued his trust and wanted to honor his wishes precisely. As grandfather's health deteriorated, family dynamics grew increasingly strained. My father, who served as CFO despite limited financial acumen, began challenging my business decisions in board meetings. "Your grandfather's old-fashioned thinking is holding us back," he'd argue. "We should be selling off the research division and focusing on immediate profits." My mother's behavior changed too. Her usual emotional manipulation intensified. "Your grandfather always put business before family," she'd say with a calculated sigh. "I hope you won't make the same mistake when you're in charge." 3 months before grandfather passed away, I noticed suspicious meetings between my parents and Harold Goldman, our family attorney. Walking past the library one evening while visiting my parents' home, I overheard fragments that made my blood run cold. "The current will is problematic. Significant changes needed. Redirect assets. Question of capacity. That night, I called Jackson Pierce, an attorney I knew from college who specialized in estate law. I described my concerns without revealing names. Document everything, Pierce advised. Save emails. Record conversations where legal. Keep copies of your contributions to the business. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. I started gathering evidence methodically. I backed up business emails showing my leadership roles and successes. I recorded conversations with my parents when they discussed grandfather's estate, always making sure to comply with Massachusetts two-party consent laws by openly placing my phone on the table while recording. After noticing documents moved in grandfather's study, I installed a small hidden camera. Nothing illegal, just a tiny security camera positioned to view his desk, the kind people use to monitor their homes while away. I told myself it was excessive, that family wouldn't really betray family. But grandfather's words echoed in my mind. Trust is good, Quinn, but verification is better. As grandfather's health failed rapidly, I spent every possible moment with him. While my parents and Samantha visited for carefully timed appearances, I was there daily, helping nurses adjust his pillows, reading him Wall Street Journal articles, or simply sitting quietly while he slept. During his final week, I practically lived in a chair beside his hospital bed. On his last day, during a rare moment of clarity, he gripped my hand with surprising strength. Trust no one but yourself with our legacy, Quinn, he whispered. They don't understand what we've built. Those were the last words he spoke to me, and I carried them like a weight in my chest as we laid him to rest a week later. The day of grandfather's funeral matched my mood perfectly. Dark clouds hung low over the cemetery, and a persistent drizzle turned the ground soft beneath our feet. As a pallbearer, I felt the physical weight of his custom mahogany casket on my shoulder, but it was nothing compared to the emotional burden of his absence. I noticed my parents whispering to each other throughout the service, occasionally glancing my way with unreadable expressions. Samantha stood beside them in designer black, dabbing at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Her performance of grief seemed rehearsed, complete with small, camera-ready sobs whenever distant relatives approached. 1 week later, we gathered at Harold Goldman's wood-paneled office for the reading of the will. Goldman had been our family attorney for 30 years, his silver hair and bow ties a constant presence at holiday dinners and company events. I'd always respected him, though lately, something in his manner toward me had changed. Before we begin, Goldman said, adjusting his glasses, I want to express my deepest sympathies to the Reynolds family. William was not just a client, but a dear friend. The initial reading proceeded, as expected. Goldman confirmed grandfather's wishes. I would receive controlling interest in Reynolds Technologies and approximately $10 million in personal assets. Various charities would receive substantial donations, and the remaining family members would receive smaller but still generous bequests. I felt no triumph, only solemn responsibility. This was exactly what grandfather had prepared me for. Then my father cleared his throat, interrupting Goldman mid-sentence. Harold, I believe you're working from outdated documents. My father executed a new will 3 weeks before his passing. My heart stopped as my father produced a leather portfolio and extracted several official-looking papers. Goldman hesitated, glancing between my father and me with unmistakable discomfort. I wasn't aware of a more recent document, Robert. It was a private matter, my father replied smoothly. Dad was concerned about Quinn's decision-making. He wanted to make changes without creating family tension. Goldman took the papers with visible reluctance. As he reviewed them, his expression shifted from confusion to resignation. This does appear to be properly executed. If authentic, it would supersede the previous will. What does it say? My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Goldman cleared his throat. According to this document, William Reynolds leaves controlling interest of Reynolds Technologies and the bulk of his personal estate to Samantha Reynolds. Quinn Reynolds receives his grandfather's watch and a sum of $50,000 in appreciation of his service to the company. The room spun around me. This couldn't be happening, That's impossible. Grandfather would never do that. I'm afraid the document seems legally binding, Goldman said, not meeting my eyes. I leaned forward, fighting to keep my voice steady. I want verification. Carbon dating, handwriting analysis, everything. This isn't right. My father's face hardened. Your grandfather finally saw you for who you really are, Quinn. Always thinking you know better than everyone else. We always knew you weren't cut out for this responsibility, my mother added, her voice dripping with false sympathy. The pressure was already affecting your judgment. I looked at Samantha, expecting at least some discomfort at this blatant deception. Instead, she offered a practiced look of sympathy, barely concealing a triumphant smirk. I'm so sorry, Quinn. I had no idea grandfather changed his mind. I turned to Goldman. As an officer of the court, you have an obligation to authenticate this document properly. Grandfather showed me his will just months ago, and these terms contradict his explicit wishes. Goldman shuffled papers nervously. The signatures appear to match our records, and there are 2 witnesses. I've reviewed it for legal sufficiency. Who witnessed it? I demanded. The family butler and a home health aide, Goldman replied, still avoiding eye contact. The drive home was excruciating. I followed my parents' Mercedes in my own car, mind racing through possibilities. This had to be fraud. Grandfather had been clear about his intentions repeatedly, not just to me, but to business associates and friends. When we arrived at the family estate, I found my parents and Samantha already gathered in the living room, as if waiting for my arrival. The confrontation I'd been dreading was apparently unavoidable. You falsified that will, I stated flatly as I entered. Grandfather wasn't even coherent 3 weeks before his death. The medications had him hallucinating. How dare you? My mother gasped, hand dramatically flying to her pearl necklace. Your grandfather made his own decisions. After seeing how you were trying to change company direction against his wishes, my father added, your modern ideas were going to destroy his legacy. I stood my ground. That's a lie. The renewable energy division I championed was his idea originally. He was proud of where I was taking it. My mother's face transformed then, her society smile replaced by something cold I barely recognized. You were always just a backup plan in case your sister didn't step up. Your grandfather realized before the end that Samantha has more Reynolds spirit than you ever will. The words hit like physical blows. A backup plan? After everything I'd done, all the nights and weekends sacrificed for the company, the innovations I'd brought to market, the relationships I'd built with clients and employees, pack your things and be out by morning, my father said with finality. This house belongs to your sister now. I retreated to my childhood bedroom, mind spinning with disbelief and betrayal. The room looked exactly as it had when I left for college. Trophies from business competitions lining the shelves, framed certificates on the walls. Every achievement I'd earned to make my family proud now seemed like evidence of a massive self-deception. With shaking hands, I called Jackson Pierce. They did it, I said simply when he answered. They falsified the will. Don't say anything more to them, Pierce advised. Start gathering whatever personal documents you can. We'll fight this, but it needs to be strategic. As I hung up, I stared at the ceiling I'd gazed at countless nights as a child, planning my future in the family business. In those dreams, I'd never imagined my family would be the ones to destroy everything I'd worked for. The reality of my situation hit me as I pulled my suitcase from the closet. 32 years old, and I was being expelled from my family like a disgrace. I moved methodically, selecting clothes, personal mementos, and most importantly, documents. My birth certificate, passport, academic records, and a portable hard drive containing backed-up emails and company records all went into a separate messenger bag. I was carefully folding a photo of grandfather and me at my college graduation when my bedroom door burst open. My mother stood in the doorway, face flushed with anger. Everything here belongs to the family now, she declared, eyes fixed on my bags. You're only taking what you came in with, and you came in with nothing. I continued packing. refusing to meet her gaze. My personal belongings are mine, not part of any inheritance. The clothes on your back were paid for with Reynolds' money, she countered. The education that gave you those fancy ideas was Reynolds' money. I reached for my laptop, containing years of business files and personal projects. This is my property, purchased with my salary. She lunged forward, grabbing the computer. This contains company information. It stays. I held firm to the laptop. I earned every cent of my salary through work, not handouts. This is mine. Mother's face contorted with rage. "Robert!" she shouted, maintaining her grip on my computer while blocking the doorway. "Come quick!" Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. My father appeared behind her, already red-faced as if anticipating confrontation. "He's stealing company property," Mother said, nodding toward the laptop we were both clutching. "These are my personal belongings," I repeated, struggling to maintain composure. "I have every right to take them." Father stepped into the room, looming over me despite our similar height. "You have no rights in this house anymore. Your sister owns everything now." "That's not how inheritance works," I said, my lawyer's advice giving me courage. "Even if that fraudulent will stands, it doesn't retroactively make my possessions Samantha's property." Something dangerous flashed in my father's eyes. Without warning, he released the laptop and grabbed a fistful of my hair at the crown of my head. Pain shot through my scalp as he yanked backward with shocking strength. "You ungrateful little shit," he growled, twisting his grip tighter. "After everything we've given you." Before I could react, he was dragging me by my hair, forcing me to stumble backward to avoid losing chunks of scalp. I dropped the laptop to grab at his wrist, but his grip only tightened as he pulled me through the doorway and into the hallway. The physical pain was excruciating, but the humiliation burned deeper. I'd never been handled this way, not even as a child. Father had always been emotionally distant, occasionally verbally cutting, but never physically abusive. This was a man I didn't recognize. As he dragged me down the hallway, my flailing arms knocked several framed family photos from the walls. The sound of shattering glass punctuated my protests. I caught a glimpse of one fallen frame, a family portrait from a Christmas long ago, now cracked down the middle between where I stood and the rest of the family. Mother followed behind, gathering my scattered belongings and shoving them haphazardly into my bag. "You ungrateful child, after everything we've done," she kept repeating, as if the mantra would justify what was happening. I glimpsed Samantha watching from her bedroom doorway, hand covering her mouth in what might have been shock, but did nothing to help. The front door was already open when we reached the foyer. With a final vicious yank, Father propelled me through it and onto the front steps. My bag followed, contents spilling across the manicured lawn. From the corner of my eye, I saw our neighbors across the street freeze in the middle of retrieving their mail, witnessing my humiliation. I stumbled but caught myself before falling completely. Tears of pain and rage blurred my vision as I turned to face my parents standing in the doorway. "You'll regret this," I said, my voice shaking but clear enough to carry. "The truth always comes out." Father laughed, an ugly sound I'd never heard from him before. "No one will believe you over us. You're nothing without the Reynolds name, and that's not yours anymore." The door slammed with finality. I stood there for several moments, scalp throbbing, staring at the house I'd grown up in, now as forbidding as a fortress. Slowly, I gathered my scattered belongings, aware of curious neighbors pretending not to watch. My phone buzzed with a text from Samantha. "I'm sorry it had to be this way. Maybe you can come work for me someday." That night, I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot, unable to process the complete betrayal. I called several friends, people I'd considered close, only to hear sudden reluctance in their voices. "Sorry, man. Our guest room is being renovated," or "This isn't a good time. Family visiting." Word had already spread. Or more likely, my parents had made preemptive calls. I scrolled through social media in disbelief, finding Samantha had already posted about her exciting new role continuing grandfather's legacy with hundreds of congratulatory comments. Several mutual connections had already unfriended me, choosing the side with power and money. Morning brought new horrors. My credit cards were declined at a diner where I tried to buy breakfast. A quick phone check revealed all my accounts were frozen pending review of suspicious activity. The betrayal was premeditated and thorough. In the diner's bathroom, I finally broke down completely. Leaning against the graffitied wall of a bathroom stall, I let out silent, heaving sobs that felt ripped from my chest. For a few dark moments, I wondered if it would be easier to just disappear, start over somewhere with a new name, abandon the fight entirely. As I splashed cold water on my face, I felt something heavy in my pocket. Grandfather's watch, the one item from the fraudulent will they couldn't deny me. I pulled it out, a vintage Patek Philippe he'd worn daily for decades. Turning it over, I noticed for the first time an inscription on the back, "Truth endures." Staring at those two simple words, something hardened within me. Grandfather had known. He'd anticipated this betrayal and left me this message. This wasn't just about money or a company anymore. This was about justice and truth. I straightened my shoulders and looked at my reflection in the spotted mirror. They have no idea what's coming, I told myself, slipping the watch onto my wrist. Its steady ticking felt like a countdown to vindication. That afternoon, I met Jackson Pierce at a small coffee shop 20 miles from my family's neighborhood. I chose the location carefully, somewhere my parents and their social circle would never frequent. Housed in a converted gas station with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, it was worlds away from the gleaming corporate aesthetic of Reynolds Technologies. Pierce arrived in a rumpled suit that somehow still looked expensive, his reputation for brilliance allowing him certain eccentricities in appearance. He ordered us both black coffees and leaned forward. "This will be tough, but not impossible if that will was fabricated," he said without preamble. "Your grandfather was a prominent figure. Courts take falsification of such documents extremely seriously." I nodded, the weight of his watch heavy on my wrist. They were thorough. They've frozen my accounts, turned friends against me, everything. "Expected," Pierce said, taking a sip of coffee. "What they don't expect is that you were prepared. Tell me you have something." For the first time since the betrayal, I felt a flicker of hope. "I have everything. Backed up emails going back 5 years showing grandfather's intentions. Recorded conversations about succession planning. Copies of business proposals he approved that my parents opposed." Pierce's eyebrows raised slightly. Impressive foresight for someone who trusted his family. "Grandfather taught me to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst," I explained. "And I also have something else." I lowered my voice. "A security camera I installed in his study after noticing documents being moved. It uploads to cloud storage only I can access." Pierce set down his coffee. "You might have just saved your case. But first things first, you need stability. Where are you staying?" The question embarrassed me. "My car, for now." Pierce frowned. "That won't do. You need to present yourself as stable and credible, not desperate, even if you feel that way." He pulled out his phone. "I know a building manager who owes me a favor. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and month to month." By evening, I had secured a modest studio apartment in a converted industrial building downtown. The space was Spartan, concrete floors, and exposed pipes, but it was clean and secure. I paid 3 months' rent up front from a personal savings account my parents didn't know about, one I'd maintained since college summer jobs. The transition from my spacious bedroom in the family mansion to this empty studio was jarring. I sat on the floor eating takeout, my few possessions arranged carefully against one wall. But with secure Wi-Fi established, I could begin the real work. First, I remotely accessed the hidden camera footage from grandfather's study. Hours of footage needed review, but I quickly found what I was looking for. 3 weeks before grandfather's death, when he was barely conscious in the hospital, my parents entered his study with Harold Goldman. Goldman looked uncomfortable as my father placed several blank papers on the desk. My mother removed documents from the safe behind a painting, comparing them to the blank sheets. The footage had no audio, but their actions were clear. They were practicing grandfather's signature. Seeing visual confirmation of their betrayal was both vindicating and deeply painful. These were my parents, the people who had raised me, now revealed as common frauds willing to destroy their own son's future. I forwarded the most damning clips to Pierce with a simple message: evidence of forgery preparation. My next step was reconnecting with grandfather's oldest friend and business partner, Franklin Mitchell. At 82, Franklin had retired from active business 5 years earlier, but remained sharp as ever. I met him at his retirement community, where he greeted me with genuine concern. "You look terrible, son," he said, inviting me into his comfortable apartment. "I've been trying to reach you since the funeral." I explained everything, holding nothing back. Franklin listened intently, his weathered face growing increasingly troubled. "William would never have cut you out," he confirmed. "In fact, he made arrangements even he didn't tell your parents about." My heart quickened. "What kind of arrangements?" Franklin shuffled to a desk and retrieved a folder. "Your grandfather created a separate trust for the company's most valuable patents, worth millions in licensing fees alone. As trustee, I was instructed to transfer control to you 1 month after his passing, regardless of the will's contents. He said it was insurance against vultures, though he never specified who the vultures might be." I stared at the document in disbelief. Grandfather really had anticipated everything. With control of the key patents, I would have significant leverage over the company's future, regardless of who held nominal ownership. Over the next weeks, I methodically built my case while appearing to have accepted defeat. I kept my apartment address private, using a P.O. box for mail. I took a job as a consultant with a small tech firm to generate income, working remotely to minimize public appearances. Meanwhile, reports from Reynolds Technologies began filtering in. Loyal employees, concerned about new management directions, contacted me discreetly. Samantha had already replaced 3 department heads with friends lacking qualifications. She'd canceled the Renewable Energy Division's flagship project, despite its promising test results, redirecting funds to office renovations and an extravagant company retreat. Most significantly, Harold Goldman's assistant reached out through a secure email. "Mr. Goldman has been drinking heavily since the will reading," she wrote. "He mentioned forgery twice while intoxicated. I believe he wants to make things right, but is afraid of the consequences." I forwarded this to Pierce, who arranged for a handwriting expert to analyze the suspicious will using samples we'd obtained. The preliminary report confirmed our suspicions. The signature showed telltale signs of forgery, including hesitation marks and unnatural pen pressure. Living this double life took its toll. During days, I maintained the appearance of someone defeated, taking the modest consulting job, living frugally, staying off social media. But nights were devoted to meticulous case building, organizing evidence, preparing statements, and coordinating with Pierce's growing legal team. I often worked until dawn, fueled by determination rather than sleep. What kept me going through the darkest moments wasn't thoughts of revenge or even reclaiming the money. It was the memory of grandfather's faith in me, his certainty that I was the right person to carry his legacy forward. Each piece of evidence collected felt like fulfilling a promise to him. After 6 weeks of preparation, Pierce filed our first legal action, a request for forensic examination of the disputed will. It was a small move, designed primarily to put my parents and their legal team on notice that a challenge was coming. The filing was done quietly, without publicity, but its effects were immediate. My father called within hours, his voicemail message oscillating between threats and awkward attempts at reconciliation. "This is unnecessary and embarrassing for everyone," he said. "We should discuss this as a family." I didn't return the call. The time for family discussions had passed the moment they dragged me from my home by my hair. Meanwhile, Reynolds Technologies stock began to falter as news of Samantha's impulsive leadership decisions reached investors. A prominent industry blog published an article questioning the sudden leadership change from experienced executive Quinn Reynolds to his socialite sister, with no business background. The company's public relations team issued a statement about exciting new directions, but the stock continued its downward trend. To protect our case from potential interference, I created a secure digital vault containing all evidence, accessible only by Pierce and myself, with multiple backups in different locations. If anything happened to me, the truth would still come out. As our case strengthened daily, I received an unexpected gift from grandfather beyond the grave. Franklin discovered a letter in his personal files, dated just 1 month before grandfather's death, explicitly stating his intentions for succession and expressing concerns about family members who might not respect my wishes. The letter wasn't legally binding, but it provided powerful corroboration of grandfather's true desires. With each passing week, my confidence grew alongside our evidence. Pierce's team now included forensic accountants tracking financial irregularities since Samantha took control, document experts building the forgery case, and investigators interviewing staff who had witnessed my parents' suspicious behavior around the time of grandfather's death. "We're almost ready to file the comprehensive challenge," Pierce told me during one of our regular meetings. "When we do, it's going to create a firestorm. Are you prepared for that?" Looking at the substantial case we'd built, the irrefutable evidence of fraud and betrayal, I nodded with certainty. I've been preparing for this my entire life, I realized. I just never knew it would be against my own family. 6 months after being thrown out of my family home, I watched from afar as Reynolds Technologies began crumbling under Samantha's leadership. The company that grandfather had built over 50 years, that I had helped modernize and expand, was now losing major clients and talented employees at an alarming rate. News reached me that Westfield Innovations, our largest client with a $50 million annual contract, was threatening to pull out after multiple project delays and quality issues. The renewable energy division I'd championed had been gutted, its brilliant team scattered to competitors. 3 board members had resigned in protest over irresponsible management decisions. I took no pleasure in the company's struggles. Hundreds of dedicated employees were suffering, their jobs and livelihoods at risk because of my family's greed and incompetence. Each headline about Reynolds Technologies' troubles felt like watching a childhood home burn while standing powerless on the sidewalk. On a rainy Tuesday morning, my phone displayed a number I'd once known by heart but hadn't seen in months. My father's private line. "We need to talk," he said without greeting when I answered. His voice lacked its usual confidence. I agreed to meet him at his club, a century-old establishment where Boston's business elite gathered behind mahogany panels and strict privacy rules. The neutral territory gave me confidence, and Pierce had advised that hearing their side directly might provide additional ammunition for our case. Walking into the club felt like stepping into a past life. Staff, who had once greeted me warmly now, regarded me with careful neutrality, aware of my changed status. My father waited in a corner booth, looking older than I remembered. 6 months had etched new lines around his eyes, and his normally immaculate appearance showed subtle signs of neglect, a slightly wrinkled shirt cuff, thinning hair less perfectly combed. Pride and desperation battled on his face as I sat across from him. "You're looking well," he offered stiffly. "What do you want?" I kept my voice level, hands folded calmly on the table. He cleared his throat. "The company is facing some temporary challenges. Nothing serious. But it would be helpful to have someone with your specific expertise during this transition period." I almost laughed at the audacity. "You're asking me to come back and fix the mess you and Samantha have created." As a consultant, he clarified quickly, "with appropriate compensation, of course. Your sister is still learning the ropes." "My sister has had 6 months to learn the ropes," I replied. "And what happened to me not being cut out for responsibility? What happened to me destroying grandfather's legacy with my modern ideas?" Father's jaw tightened. "This isn't productive, Quinn. We're offering you a way back in, a chance to preserve what your grandfather built." "As a consultant," I repeated. No ownership, no authority, just cleaning up your mess while you maintain control. It's a generous offer, considering the circumstances. I studied him carefully, noting the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for his water glass. The circumstances being that you forged grandfather's will, stole my inheritance, and physically threw me out of the family? That's your interpretation, he said stiffly. We have a different perspective. I'm sure the court will find my interpretation quite compelling, especially with the evidence we've gathered. A flash of genuine fear crossed his face. Be reasonable, Quinn. Legal battles destroy families. You destroyed this family the moment you chose Samantha's entitlement over grandfather's wishes, I said, rising from my seat. You made your choice. I'm making mine. That evening, news broke that Reynolds Technologies was laying off 200 employees, mostly from product development and research divisions. The company statement cited restructuring needs, but industry analysts correctly identified desperate cost-cutting measures. These were talented people I'd personally hired, now losing their livelihoods because of my family's betrayal. For a moment, I questioned my resolve. Was pursuing justice worth the collateral damage to innocent employees? Should I swallow my pride and accept the consultant position to protect their jobs? A surprise encounter the following day answered that question definitively. While picking up coffee at a shop near my apartment, I literally bumped into Barbara, my father's executive secretary for over 15 years. "Quinn!" she exclaimed, genuine warmth in her voice. "I've been hoping to run into you." We found a quiet corner table, and Barbara spoke in hurried, nervous tones. "I've wanted to contact you for months, but they monitor everything at the office now, even personal phones. What's happening?" "It's worse than the news reports. Your sister has no idea what she's doing, and your parents are in denial." She leaned closer. "But that's not why I needed to find you. It's about your grandfather's will. I was there that day." My heart raced. "You witnessed the signing?" She shook her head. "Not the real one. The fake one. Your father asked me to come to the hospital to update some paperwork. When I arrived, your grandfather was barely conscious. They had a home health aide there too, someone new I didn't recognize. Your father had documents ready, and they guided your grandfather's hand to sign. He wasn't even aware what was happening. Would you be willing to testify to this?" I asked, hardly daring to hope. Barbara nodded solemnly. "I've been keeping detailed notes since that day, dates, and times of everything I witnessed. It wasn't right, what they did to you, and it's destroying the company your grandfather loved." Within days of this conversation, Samantha made her most reckless decision yet. Without board approval, she announced the sale of Reynolds Technologies' core medical technology division to a competitor for a fraction of its value, allegedly to focus on consumer products. The stock plummeted 20% in a single day, triggering regulatory inquiries. My parents' messages became increasingly frantic. Voicemails, texts, even a handwritten letter delivered to my P.O. box alternated between blaming me for not helping and offering vague terms of reconciliation. "Family should stand together in difficult times," my mother wrote, conveniently forgetting how they'd expelled me from that very family. Then, unexpectedly, she appeared at my apartment door. Pierce had advised against revealing my address, but apparently, they'd hired someone to find me. She looked smaller somehow. Designer clothes hanging slightly loose on her frame, makeup not quite concealing her exhaustion. "Quinn, please," she began without greeting. "The company is all we have. Your father isn't sleeping. Samantha is in over her head. We need you." "You should have thought of that before forging grandfather's will," I replied, maintaining a barrier at the doorway. "It wasn't like that," she insisted. "Your grandfather was confused at the end. We were just helping him express his true wishes by making him sign documents while heavily medicated, by dragging me out of the house by my hair. That's how you express true wishes?" Her tactics shifted rapidly between tears, accusations, and vague promises. "We could revisit the ownership structure. Samantha could make you a vice president. You always worked well together as children." "We're not children anymore," I said. And this isn't about jobs or titles. It's about right and wrong. As she left, her parting words chilled me. You don't want to make enemies of us, Quinn. There's still so much you don't understand about this family. The threat lingered in the air long after she'd gone. That night, returning to my car after meeting Pierce, I found a note tucked under the windshield wiper. Drop it or else. Final warning. For the first time since beginning this fight, fear crept in. How far would they go to protect their fraud? I doubled my security measures, varying my routines, installing cameras at my apartment door. In a moment of doubt, I almost called Pierce to discuss settlement options. Maybe some compromise could end this cleanly. Then my phone rang with an unknown number. Quinn Reynolds, a female voice asked. This is Eliza Cordova. I was your grandfather's night nurse during his final month. My breath caught. Yes, I remember you. I've been following the news about Reynolds Technologies, she continued, and I can't stay quiet anymore. There's something you should know about your grandfather's last weeks and those visitors he had. We met in Pierce's office that evening, where Eliza revealed critical information. She had witnessed my parents pressuring my grandfather while he was heavily medicated, bringing documents multiple times despite his deteriorated condition. Most damning, she had contemporaneous nursing notes documenting his mental state, clearly showing he lacked capacity to execute legal documents during the period when the fraudulent will was allegedly signed. He talked about you constantly, Eliza told me, eyes sincere. Even when confused about other things, he was clear about you continuing his legacy. What they're doing isn't what he wanted. Pierce immediately arranged for a formal deposition, preserving Eliza's testimony under oath before my parents could potentially reach her. With Barbara's account, and now Eliza's testimony, our case had moved beyond circumstantial evidence to direct witness statements of fraud. As rumors of bankruptcy began circulating around Reynolds Technologies, I received a call from Franklin Mitchell. Quinn, I found something you need to see immediately. At his apartment, he revealed a final gift from Grandfather. During routine maintenance of Grandfather's vacation home, the caretaker had discovered a hidden safe behind a bookshelf in his private study, containing the original draft of his will, handwritten notes about his succession plans, and a letter explicitly warning about potential manipulation by my parents. Your mother always resented that I built this company instead of inheriting it like her father, he had written. She never understood the value of earning something through work rather than entitlement. I fear she's passed that flaw to your sister, while you inherited my builder's spirit. Reading his words, I felt his presence so strongly, it was as if he stood beside me. The final piece had fallen into place. With the discovery of this safe and its contents, we now had overwhelming evidence not just of forgery, but of my grandfather's true intentions. That night, Pierce called with news that would change everything. The judge has granted our request for an expedited hearing due to the company's rapid deterioration. We go to court next week. As I hung up, I stared at Grandfather's watch, still ticking steadily on my wrist. Truth endures, I whispered to the empty room. Just like you said. The morning of the court hearing arrived with an unusual clarity of purpose. After months of gathering evidence and building our case, the day of reckoning had finally come. I dressed carefully in a charcoal suit, Grandfather's watch prominently displayed on my wrist. My appearance mattered, not for vanity, but for credibility. The judge in courtroom needed to see not a bitter, vengeful son, but a composed professional fighting for truth and justice. Pierce met me outside the courthouse, his team of 3 associate attorneys flanking him with document boxes and digital presentation equipment. Ready for this? He asked, studying my face. I've been ready since the day they threw me out, I replied. We entered the courtroom to find my parents, and Samantha already seated with Harold Goldman and 2 other attorneys I didn't recognize. Their collective double-take at my appearance gave me a small satisfaction. The Quinn they'd thrown out 6 months ago, broken and disheveled, had been replaced by someone stronger, more determined, and utterly unafraid of them. Judge Lowell, A stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for zero tolerance of courtroom theatrics entered and immediately established control. This is a hearing concerning the contested will of William Reynolds and allegations of forgery and fraud. Given the significance of the case and the deteriorating situation at Reynolds Technologies, I've agreed to expedite proceedings. Let's begin. Pierce opened with a masterful overview of our case, laying out the timeline of events, the suspicious circumstances surrounding the new will, and grandfather's clear and consistent intentions prior to his death. He projected key evidence on screens visible to the entire courtroom, including emails, business records, and most damning, the security camera footage showing my parents practicing grandfather's signature. The opposing counsel, a nationally renowned litigator named Marcus Thornton, attempted to object to the video evidence, claiming invasion of privacy. Judge Lowell overruled him after Pierce established the camera had been legally installed in a shared family space with no expectation of privacy. When my turn to testify came, I walked to the witness stand with steady steps. Under Pierce's careful questioning, I detailed my relationship with grandfather, his mentorship, our shared vision for the company, and his consistent statements about succession planning. I described finding the suspicious meetings, my growing concerns, and the brutal expulsion from my home. Did your grandfather ever indicate to you that he had changed his mind about your role in the company? Pierce asked. Never, I answered firmly. Even in his final days, he reiterated his trust in me to carry forward his legacy. During cross-examination, Thornton tried to paint me as entitled and resentful of my sister. Isn't it true that you were jealous of the special relationship between your sister and your grandfather? I maintained my composure. My grandfather loved all his family, but he made business decisions based on capability and commitment, not favoritism. He and I worked side by side for over a decade building the company. Samantha never spent a day in the office until after his death. My father testified next, his usual commanding presence diminished by months of stress. He claimed grandfather had growing concerns about my leadership approach, though he could provide no specific examples. When Pierce presented emails showing grandfather's enthusiastic approval of my initiatives, father grew visibly flustered. William was old-fashioned in some ways, father insisted. He humored Quinn's ideas, but privately expressed concerns to me. Yet we have no documentation of these private concerns, Pierce noted. Only documented praise and approval in company records. Mother's testimony proved even more damaging to their case. Under Pierce's methodical questioning, her timeline of events grew increasingly contradictory. She claimed grandfather had been perfectly lucid when signing the new will, but medical records Pierce introduced showed he had been on high doses of morphine that day, with nurses' notes indicating he was minimally responsive and unable to recognize family members. When confronted with this contradiction, Mother grew defensive. The nurses were exaggerating his condition. He had good moments and bad moments. And it just happened that during one of these supposedly good moments, with no independent witnesses present except your employees, he decided to completely reverse his long-standing wishes? Pierce asked. Mother had no convincing response. The decisive moment came when Pierce played the complete security camera footage. The courtroom fell silent as we all watched my parents and Harold Goldman enter grandfather's study with blank papers, practice signatures, and compare documents from the safe. Though there was no audio, their actions were unmistakable. After this damning evidence, Samantha took the stand. Initially composed, she attempted to portray herself as an innocent beneficiary, unaware of any wrongdoing. Under Pierce's cross-examination, however, her story unraveled. Miss Reynolds, when did you first learn about the new will naming you as primary beneficiary? Pierce asked. At the will reading, like everyone else, she claimed. Pierce approached with a printout of text messages. Is this your phone number? He asked, pointing to the document. Samantha nodded reluctantly. These are text messages between you and your mother, dated 3 weeks before your grandfather's death. I quote, "Everything set with the papers? Did he sign?" And your mother's response, "All taken care of. Q won't know until too late." Samantha's face drained of color. I didn't understand what she meant. Really? Because your response was, perfect. I'll start planning the office renovation. That suggests you knew exactly what was happening. This unexpected evidence caused a stir in the courtroom. Judge Lowell called for order before allowing the testimony to continue. Samantha's damaging admission that she had indeed known about the plan to change the will contradicted her earlier statements completely. After a brief recess, forensic document examiner Dr. Lillian Zhao testified about the inconsistencies in grandfather's signature on the disputed will. The signature shows classic signs of forgery, including hesitation marks, unnatural pen pressure, and tremors inconsistent with the decedent's known signature patterns. Harold Goldman, looking haggard and defeated, was next. Rather than defend the fraudulent will, he made a surprising admission. I made a terrible error in judgment, he stated, voice breaking. The Reynolds family had been my clients for 30 years. When Robert and Elaine presented this document, I should have questioned it more thoroughly given William's condition. The most powerful testimony came from grandfather's nurse Eliza, who described in detail my parents' visits during his heavily medicated state. Mr. Reynolds was not capable of understanding legal documents during that period, she stated firmly. Most days, he couldn't even recognize his own children. Judge Lowell called an unexpected recess after this mounting evidence of fraud. I'll review the submissions in chambers, she announced. We'll reconvene in 1 hour. That hour was the longest of my life. I sat silently in a conference room with Pierce and his team, unable to eat the sandwiches they'd provided. Across the courthouse, I knew my family was doing the same, perhaps finally realizing the gravity of their actions. When proceedings resumed, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Judge Lowell's expression gave nothing away as she took her seat. After reviewing the substantial evidence presented today, she began, I find clear and convincing proof that the purported will, dated 3 weeks before William Reynolds' death, is fraudulent. The document appears to have been created through forgery and misrepresentation at a time when Mr. Reynolds lacked testamentary capacity. My heart pounded as she continued. I hereby invalidate this fraudulent document and reinstate the previous will as the true and legal expression of William Reynolds' wishes. Control of Reynolds Technologies and the specified assets will transfer immediately to Quinn Reynolds as originally intended. Relief flooded through me, almost dizzying in its intensity. Pierce squeezed my shoulder in congratulation. Judge Lowell wasn't finished. Furthermore, given the serious nature of the forgery evidence presented, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal investigation regarding forgery and elder abuse. Court is adjourned. As the gavel fell, I remained seated, overwhelmed by the moment. Across the aisle, my parents and Samantha sat in stunned silence, the reality of consequences finally setting in. Our eyes met briefly, but no words were exchanged. What could possibly be said after such betrayal? As I walked out of the courtroom surrounded by Pierce's team, reporters called questions from behind courthouse barriers. I offered only a brief statement. This was never about money, but about honoring my grandfather's wishes and protecting his legacy. Reynolds Technologies will continue its mission of innovation and excellence, just as he intended. The most powerful moment was the walk past my stunned parents and sister on the courthouse steps. No words were exchanged, no acknowledgement given. The family I had once known was now as foreign to me as strangers on the street. But unlike 6 months ago, when they'd thrown me out onto the lawn, I now walked with my head high. Grandfather's watch ticking steadily on my wrist, a constant reminder that truth, indeed, endures. 1 week after the court victory, I walked through the glass doors of Reynolds Technologies headquarters for the first time in over 6 months. The lobby looked exactly as I remembered, with grandfather's portrait still hanging prominently beside the company timeline display. Employees stopped to stare, some offering tentative smiles, others looking uncertain about how to react to my return. My first official act as reinstated CEO was calling an all-staff meeting in the main auditorium. Standing at the podium where grandfather had once announced my promotion to COO, I addressed hundreds of nervous faces. "The past 6 months have been difficult for all of us," I began, my voice echoing through the silent room. "But today marks a new chapter, not a return to the past, but a recommitment to the values that built this company: innovation, integrity, and respect for every person who contributes to our success." I outlined immediate plans to stabilize the company, including reversing the most damaging of Samantha's decisions and bringing back key team members who had been laid off. Reynolds Technologies was built on treating people right, I told them. That tradition starts again today. In the executive offices, I faced harder decisions. Several senior executives who had actively participated in the mismanagement required respectful but firm dismissal. These weren't acts of revenge, but necessary steps to rebuild a culture of accountability. The company had suffered significant damage during Samantha's brief reign. Major contracts needed renegotiation. Talented employees had to be wooed back from competitors, and investor confidence required rebuilding. The renewable energy division I'd championed had been particularly gutted, its promising projects abandoned mid-development. Every night for months, I worked until exhaustion, sleeping on the office couch more often than in my apartment. This wasn't just a company to me, but a living legacy. Each employee who thanked me for saving their job, each client who cautiously renewed their contract, felt like small victories in a larger war against the damage my family had caused. One decision surprised even Pierce, who had become not just my attorney but a trusted advisor. I instructed our legal team to establish a modest monthly allowance for Samantha, despite her role in the betrayal. "She's spoiled and entitled because that's how they raised her," I explained when Pierce questioned the decision. "Cutting her off completely would just create another enemy. Besides, I won't let their cruelty change who I am." The emotional toll of everything finally surfaced once the immediate business crisis was stabilized. One evening, alone in grandfather's former office, now mine, I found myself holding a framed photo of our entire family from years earlier. Looking at the smiling faces, including my own, I was struck by how completely the people I had loved and trusted had betrayed me. For the first time since the court victory, I allowed myself to truly break down. The sobs came from somewhere deep and primal, grief not just for what I had lost, but for what had never existed except in my imagination. A family bound by love and loyalty, rather than convenience and self-interest. That cathartic moment marked the beginning of my emotional recovery. I began building a life beyond work, reconnecting with a few loyal friends who had stood by me despite my family's influence. I found unexpected support among employees who gradually became more like chosen family than colleagues. The Reynolds Foundation was established 6 months after my return, dedicated to promoting ethical business education and supporting innovations in medical technology and renewable energy, grandfather's 2 passions. The foundation allowed his legacy to extend beyond company profits to meaningful social impact. My parents faced minor legal consequences for the forgery, primarily substantial fines and community service. I had requested leniency from the prosecutor, not out of forgiveness, but because a public trial would have further damaged the company and employees who depended on it. They relocated to our family's seldom-used home in Florida, effectively exiling themselves from Boston society that now viewed them with distrust. Rebuilding a life without the family I'd grown up with proved challenging but ultimately freeing. I maintained firm boundaries when my parents eventually attempted reconciliation with carefully worded cards on holidays and my birthday. My responses were civil but distant, acknowledging their communications without opening the door to deeper engagement. Some wounds were too profound for simple forgiveness, requiring instead a recognition that relationships sometimes cannot and should not be restored. On the first anniversary of grandfather's death, I visited his grave alone, bringing his favorite yellow roses and a small bottle of the single malt scotch he'd enjoyed on special occasions. Sitting on the bench beside his headstone, I updated him on the company's progress as if he could hear me, a habit that brought more comfort than I'd expected. "We've recovered most of the ground lost last year," I told him. The medical imaging technology you were so excited about just received FDA approval. It's going to help millions of people, just like you wanted. A gentle breeze rustled the cemetery trees, and I allowed myself to imagine it was his response. Surprisingly, Samantha was the family member who showed the most growth. After 6 months of living on the allowance I provided, she reached out through her attorney requesting a meeting. Over coffee, at a neutral location, she offered something I never expected, an apology. "I always resented how easily everything came to you," she admitted. "But now I understand you worked for everything while I just expected it. I'm sorry for what we did to you, Quinn. It was wrong." The apology didn't instantly heal the breach, but it opened a door to a different kind of relationship, one based on honesty rather than the toxic family dynamics of our childhood. She eventually found purpose volunteering at a youth mentoring program, discovering she had a genuine talent for connecting with troubled teens. 1 year after the court victory, Reynolds Technologies was thriving again under my direction. We launched innovative products in both medical technology and renewable energy sectors, earning industry recognition and restoring our reputation for cutting-edge development. The stock value had not only recovered but exceeded previous highs. More importantly, I had gained perspective on wealth and success that I couldn't have understood without experiencing their loss. Money and position were tools, not identity. True wealth lay in integrity, purpose, and the relationships built on genuine trust rather than convenience or advantage. My apartment, once a sparse refuge during crisis, gradually transformed into a real home. I still lived more modestly than my inheritance might suggest, a choice that kept me connected to what really mattered. The family mansion held no appeal. I eventually donated it to become a community arts center, turning a symbol of painful memories into something positive for many. The chosen family I built around me, loyal colleagues, genuine friends, and eventually a romantic relationship with someone who knew my story and loved me for my resilience rather than my name or position, provided the belonging I had once sought from those who shared my DNA. Sitting in my office on a crisp fall evening, watching the sunset paint the Boston skyline in gold and crimson, I realized grandfather's true legacy wasn't the company assets or even the business principles he taught me. It was the understanding that character reveals itself during crisis, that truth eventually prevails over deception, and that sometimes losing everything material is the only way to gain what truly matters: self-respect, purpose, and authentic connection. The watch he left me still keeps perfect time on my wrist. The inscription, "Truth endures," now less a painful reminder than a life philosophy. In losing the family I thought I had, I found the strength I never knew I needed, and built a life more genuine and fulfilling than the one that was taken from me. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you completely trusted? How did you rebuild afterward? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be going through similar struggles. Remember, even in our darkest moments, we have more strength than we realize. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to face whatever challenges come your way with the same resilience.